Good morning, everyone. I am so glad to be here today to talk about tips, tricks, and tools, advice for master gardeners. I'm often a little uncomfortable with the whole concept of calling myself a master gardener. It makes it sound like I know so much. It's actually a technical designation that means that I have gone through specific kind of training in order to get that volunteer title. But the truth of the matter is that master gardeners all love to garden. And so what I did for this presentation was to ask my fellow master gardeners in the Master Gardeners of Northern Virginia to send me their tips, tricks, and favorite tools ideas so that I could share them in case any of this info is useful to you. I guess I have to also introduce my cat, Shirley, who right now has decided to be very affectionate, and she's actually rubbing the computer. So if you see my screen bounce a little bit, that's why that's happening. Hopefully she'll go away and let me just talk any minute now. Okay, so let's get going. My first tip is a classic one. It's like I'm obligated as a master gardener to recommend that we all do soil tests. It really is full of such great information that can help everybody work with their garden a little bit better. When you test your soil, you will find out what the pH is and what the nutrients are. For those of us here in Virginia, we're really fortunate because we can send our soil test at a very reasonable cost to Virginia Tech to have that analysis done, and they send back result like this one here on the bottom that by email within just a few days usually of them receiving the soil test, that really tell you what kind of nutrients are in your soil and what your pH is. And it's really important that when you fertilize, you do that based on the test results. If you put fertilizer down based on guesswork and your soil doesn't need that, the fact of the matter is that it's just going to run off in the next big rainstorm and not ever be of value. Nutrients in the soil are kind of like vitamin C. It's a water-based vitamin that if you don't need it, you're just going to pee it out if you've had too much. The soil isn't going to grab extra nutrients and hold it for a long time. So only use what is needed in order to avoid the extra nutrients running off and causing water pollution. They will give you recommendations based on what your goal is, and you tell them what your goal is. I'm trying to grow vegetables, I'm trying to grow whatever. And they'll tell you specifically what you need to do in order to achieve that. There are codes. It asks you to put a code. You'll see here on the little box where you put the soil, there's a 5 boxed code space. Some people think, oh, how do I know what code to use? It's your code. You make it up so that you know which part of your garden it comes from, because you want to be able to know whether you did a soil test for your lawn, which needs very different nutrients than maybe for your native plant garden. So you just put in a code that works for you. The soil tests are available at our plant clinics and at the extension office at the Fairlington Community Center. They ask you to put the soil in this little box and mail it in. And I know that that stops a lot of people from mailing it because then they have to find a bigger box to put the small box in and mail it. And my secret here is that once you've filled your little box, you can get a big Ziploc baggie, pour the soil in there, flatten it out, take the air out, seal it, put it with the flattened out box and the form that you need to fill out in a big padded envelope. It's really easy to mail that way. Moving on, improve your soil. Our extension agent, Kirsten Conrad, said improve soil all the time. And that really is something that we should all be trying to do. And you can use compost or mulch for soil conditioning, or really great way to go is to plant wonderful native ground covers as a green mulch. That will do pretty much all the same things that compost or mulch will do. Keep the seeds out, enrich the soil, so forth. If you are using leaf mulch or bark mulch, do be sure to keep that mulch a few inches away from the trunks of shrubs and trees. When you bump it right up against there, it creates an area where insects might be able to get into the stem or trunk of that shrub or tree. So keep it a few inches away. Using leaves as mulch is a great idea. As Molly Newling says, don't throw away your leaves in the fall. Use it as mulch. That is nature's mulch, and it's far more nutritious. It's really true. That is how nature is designed. The plants take the nutrition up into their leaves and then drop the leaves. So it's the exact same nutrition they're going to need again. Joanne Hutton reminds us, leave a little bare soil for ground nesting bees because they can't go through the mulch. Try composting right into the ground. This top photo over here is where the master gardener has actually put kitchen waste right into the ground, covered it with leaves, and then turned the whole bunch every few weeks to create compost right into the soil. It's quite nice. And another idea is to use old bales of hay to cover the ground and use it on paths. That'll break down with time and also become really nice mulch. You can turn it over and work it right into the soil. Tip: learn to share your yard with other creatures. This little video in the center is a carpenter bee on a passion flower vine in my own yard. And I love this little video because it shows that symbiotic relationship between pollinators and native plants. Most insects are good. We're really fond of, saying there are good insects and bad insects. And the truth of the matter is, most of them are good, even if they're not actively doing something that we think is so helpful. They have a role in the environment. Animals don't read maps. They don't know where your property line is. They're going to come and go. And that's really how it should be. I love what I've read on the internet on a meme several times. If nothing is eating your garden, it's not part of the ecosystem. And really, what our garden should be is the basis of the food chain for all of nature. Douglas Tallamy, the wonderful entomologist at the University of Delaware, has a 10-foot rule where if you stand back 10 feet and don't notice the nibbles on your plants, don't worry about it. Those insects are not doing anything bad to your plant. If they're not doing more damage than that, they're okay. And I really like to point out this photo in the upper left. At first, when I started seeing leaves, and it's often on redbud leaves, interestingly enough, with these little holes cut out of the edge, I thought, oh, this is a problem. Until I learned that that's the result of leafcutter bees cutting what they need to create nests for their babies. They take these little pieces of leaf and roll them, and it almost looks like a little tiny cigar. And that's where their babies grow until they can hatch out. Now, when I see that, it makes me really happy. And I see it as being kind of polka dotted, like they've decorated my leaves. So I invite you to have that little mind shift. Trick: how to find reliable information. And this is something that's actually drilled into master gardeners, that while you are searching for information, use the term site:/edu or site:/gov to access educational and government sites that are not just hearsay. They're not somebody's old story about what happened in their grandmother's yard. This is based on science, and it'll help you to know which things you should really pay attention to. And kind of the corollary is that so many of the gardening hacks that I see, and I am a big Pinterest fan, but more for recipes. I keep seeing these suggestions of what to do with plants, use this or that kitchen spice to fix a problem. And so many of them really aren't good. Here's an example here from North Dakota State University about how Epsom salt is advised for all sorts of stuff, and it really doesn't always help in that way. Tools. Good pruners are worth the investment. And I have to say, I almost question if somebody is truly a gardener if they don't have a pair of pruners, because it's such an essential tool. The advice here from our extension agent: always use the best and sharpest tool available to you. And that's so true. It's worth paying more because they'll last a lifetime. These particular Felcos, these are all my tools. This pair of Felcos I have had for a good 20 years, and they are still going great for me. Master gardeners are not in the business of recommending brands, but this is a report of what a bunch of different master gardeners personally use. So you can take that for what it's worth. Ratcheting pruners are a really great idea, particularly if your hands, you don't feel like they're very strong. The ratcheting mechanism gives a bunch more leverage that allows you to easily do multiple cuts on one spot and get through tougher branch than you would think on your own. These loppers that I have here are also ratcheting loppers, and oh my goodness, they can really do a lot. Don't cut a branch bigger than your hand tool allows, however, because it can damage the hinge, and I have done that. So please learn from me on this one. And here's another slide that I really want you to learn from me instead of your own experience. Again, our agent said, wear gloves and eye protection. And in fact, I had for many years these safety glasses here that my friend Elaine Mills is kindly helping model here, but they were kind of big and bulky and not great. And so I wasn't wearing them. And I eventually, after getting this advice, I bought these safety glasses, which don't really even look like safety glasses. In fact, here, I'll put them on here. They have side protection here. Now, these are not what you would wear if you're going to go out welding, but they're going to keep things from flying into your eyes. But did I follow this advice? I did not. And I just a year ago, I think it was just a year ago, was out gardening, and I ended up putting a thorn of a greenbrier vine into my left eyeball. And let me tell you, driving to the emergency room with blood running down your eye is no fun at all. Now, everyone in the ER said I was incredibly fortunate. Nothing important got hit. I had to put in eye drops for a week or so, and it all healed up really well. But guess what I do now? I wear these glasses every time I garden, and they're really comfortable, and I feel much more secure now. So please learn from my bad experience and don't go through that yourself. You never know when something's going to fly up and hit your eye. Another really important piece of advice that actually has a close corollary is to make sure your tetanus shot is up to date. When I got to the ER, that was one of their first questions was, when was your last tetanus shot? And mine was actually up to date, but I couldn't remember exactly when. And so they said, we're going to give you another one because it's really important. Tetanus is a really nasty disease, and about a third of the infections of tetanus in America come from gardening. You need a booster every 10 years. It's not a difficult shot. So the next time you're at your doctor, I really advise you double check your record. And if you haven't gotten your tetanus shot in the last 10 years, do get one. Tip: dig the right hole and plant well. The advice on how to dig a good hole and what planting needs has actually changed over the years. Loosen the root balls so the roots aren't tight. That hopefully has never changed. But it's so important to have those roots not in a tight ball that you may need to cut some of the roots. If they're really tightly wound, it's far better to cut some and lose some roots, because those roots need to not think that they're still in the pot. If they're all still wound around, they're going to think they're still in a pot. They're just going to keep growing that way. You can see this bizarre plant over here, which really is planted too high. This is how it looked when it went into the ground, and it's never changed. It's better to cut some roots than to leave them so tightly wound. The hole should be 3 to 5 times wider than the root ball and maybe slightly less than the height. And that's because it's far better to plant a little too high than too low. You don't want to plant too low and, like the mulch would do, have soil up against the trunk and introduce a place for insects or pathogens to get in. You'd rather have it just a little too high rather than too low. Here's what's so new that we've really come to understand. Don't amend the soil. Used to be commonly advised, add in, fertilizer, add in better soil, potting mix, whatever. No, the fact of the matter is that the plant will prefer that and may never learn to grow out into the native soil. But if you use the same soil that you dug out to fill right back in, then it will not see the edge of your hole as a barrier, and it will grow right into the soil and spread its roots out the way that it should. Good piece of advice is that if you have to do some planting or digging, wait until there's been a nice rain so that the soil isn't too hard. I've actually been known to do a light sprinkle the evening before so that by the morning when I need to plant something, I know the soil is going to be nice and soft, not soggy, but a little bit moist and soft. And then the last piece of advice is, if you have trouble, as I actually do, with creatures digging out what you've just planted, particularly small plants, put some rocks on top of them temporarily until they grow a little bit. That'll keep the critters away. A tip: how to know how much sun you have. I cannot tell you how often I am asked about somebody who, they want to plant something that needs to go in sun or needs to go in shade. And they say, well, I have a mix of sun and shade. What is it? Is it sun or is it shade? And the answer to that really is that if it's mixed, then when you have sun in the afternoon, you can count it as sunny. If you have sun in the morning, count it as shady. The afternoon sun is hotter and brighter than the morning sun. And so that's why afternoon is a sunnier kind of sun than the morning is. All these people who are concerned that they have shade, people are always saying, well, what if I only have shade? What if I plant it there? And I have to say, it's very rare that a plant will actually die because it wants more sun than it's getting. Plants will try to live no matter what. But if they want sun and aren't getting enough, what they're likely to do is the leaves cells are actually going to not be as compact and tight. They grow kind of long, which creates longer leaves and less strength in the leaves and often the branches. So you get something that's leggier, and they're not going to bloom as much, and the fruit isn't going to set as much. But the plant itself probably won't die. You just aren't going to get as much fruit. That's what I have. For instance, I have winterberry in shade, and it just doesn't have as much nice fruit as it would if it was in the sun. They're growing perfectly well. Two of the plants that you really hear a lot about, most tomatoes need at least 8 hours of sun for good fruit set, and most roses need 6 hours of sun for good bloom, but there are some varieties that can take less. Tools: find good gloves. For years, I couldn't find good gloves, and I gardened barehanded, and boy, did my hands really feel it and weren't in good shape. But fortunately now we have gloves that come in a myriad of products and coatings and sizes. For me, the size really made a difference. I have pretty long fingers, and women's gloves that aren't size large aren't really going to fit on me and they're going to be really uncomfortable. But now I can find size large women's and they fit beautifully. Find something that makes you feel like you're barehanded. One master gardener uses a brand called Fox gloves. Another uses something called women's wear digger gloves. I like the latex coating because it gives a good grip, but you can still feel the texture of the soil and the plant and anything you're working with through that. I will say I do go through the finger and the thumb on my right hand. I'm right-handed, and those will get holes in them. And so I actually got a friend with same size hands, and I sometimes give her my left hand gloves because she's left-handed. So you might want to see if you can find a gardening partner to trade gloves with. Tip, always plan for the full size of your plant. Look at both the height and the width of the mature plant and plan for it. This is a best management practice that all of us master gardeners are supposed to be adhering to. And here are some examples of what happens when you don't do that. You plant a plant too close to an edge and you will be forever cutting that thing back or blocking people's access if it's next to a sidewalk. Here's a photo of someone who put in a tree way too close to the house. That tree is always going to grow lopsided, will never be a well-balanced tree. Here's a photo of someone who did not consider the size of their shrub in relationship to the windows on their home. So they are only going to see plant through their windows. Maybe that's what they want, but I kind of doubt it. And here's one, this applies even to plants that plant themselves. I'm pretty sure that this little red cedar plant planted itself right there on the edge. That's a great little plant, but if they don't dig it out soon, they're not going to be able to get those roots out and they're only going to be able to cut it down. So if they want to transplant it, they need to do that really soon. Smother your grass. This is a great trick. There's so many presentations, and in fact, I've been involved with one called Case Studies in Lawn Replacement, where you need to get rid of grass. And one way you can do that is by smothering it. 12 inches of arborist chips or really heavy wood mulch will kill pretty much anything, and eventually it'll break down and create a wonderful bed full of organic matter. Another way you can go with a little bit of caution is to use overlapping newspaper, cardboard, or heavy craft paper, and then put several inches of mulch for at least 6 weeks. The reason I say with a little bit of caution is that you will be killing some life in the soil underneath that. But usually it's pretty minimal. And the great part about that is that it's likely to kill the lawn underneath. And then at the end of the 6 weeks, you can dig holes right through that mulch and paper and start planting. And what that does is that it suppresses the seed bank. We do not recommend using the paper just generally under mulch. It's only when you are trying to suppress the seed bank and change the nature of the area that you're gardening in. We're to the first point for questions. Do we have any, Colleen?
Just one, Alyssa. If you have a very large yard, front yard, backyard, side yard, without breaking the bank, how do you decide how many soil tests you need and where?
Sure, that's a really good question. I would say you've got to prioritize. First of all, consider what kind of differences are you trying to do? If you're trying to put in native plants in most of that area, you may not need a lot of different soil tests. But if you're trying to do lawn in one and native plants in another area and vegetables, you should do a soil test for each. Also, only do it when you're about to work there. If this year you're planning on really attacking two specific areas, just do the tests there. Don't try to test everything if you're not going to be working with everything right away.
Thank you. There was one late entry. Is it bad to use black plastic to burn turf because it kills insects?
Yeah. First of all, the black plastic, depending on what you're doing, I take it they mean to put it down and then to take it back up after stuff is dead underneath. And yes, that will happen. You are going to kill more than just the plants underneath it. You're going to likely be killing insects, microorganisms. There's a lot of life in the soil, and that will very likely maybe not kill everything in the soil, but will start down that road very strongly, depending on how long you leave that black plastic for. Now, sometimes it's worth it. People have to make decisions based on priorities. Sometimes there's something growing in an area that is so problematic and you've tried everything else and nothing else works. And maybe black plastic is the only option. But you need to understand what it's going to do, that it's going to kill a lot underneath, and that once you remove the black plastic, there may be some time needed to recover from that. Tip, hand pull your weeds. And I really agree with this one. I love hand pulling my weeds. We've got someone who said hand pulling weeds is therapeutic. Pull them when they're small and then put in more plants to cover up the soil, which is really an important follow up. Hand pulling weeds either with or without a tool helps you get to know your soil and helps you get to know what the creatures are on it or in it. And it's really satisfying. I love having a little pile of weeds that I can get rid of. I feel very accomplished after that. Tool. This is my favorite tool, the hori hori knife. It means dig, dig in Japanese. It has wonderful sharp blades. It's very narrow and can get into tight spaces. It's very long, so you can get out tap roots of dandelions, or my favorite, I feel that I am a champion remover of onion grass. I can get the bulb of the onion grass with my hori hori knife, which is really the only way to guarantee that it's not coming back the next year. It generally has a serrated side that you can use to cut through roots when you're down there. Not giant roots, obviously. This is not the same as a pruning saw, but it can do a really great job on smaller roots. And many are marked with inches so that if you're using them to plant bulbs, you can do that. These are my two hori hori knives here, and I will point out that I have gone with ones that have a handle that is curved and really fits my grip. My first hori hori knife wasn't curved, and I ended up using the end of it a lot to push in with the heel of my hand. And I started having a little pain there as a result. But the ones that are rounded really fit nicely into my hand, and I don't use the heel of my hand. Many master gardeners have hori hori knives, and this is two of my compatriots, my co-coordinators over at Glen Carlin Library Garden, celebrating our hori hori knives. I will give you a little word of warning. I have one time pulled out a hori hori knife and had someone jump back. She thought I was pulling out a weapon on her. So do watch out if you're talking with someone that they don't think that you're upset at them or something. Keeping herbicide on the weeds. We have to start with this best management practice of identifying your weeds first and always determine the best method of getting rid of them. If the best method is using an herbicide, you've got to use an appropriate herbicide and only when other methods are ineffective, and follow the label directions very carefully. But once you're meeting all those conditions, there are a few tricks to making sure that your herbicide is only going to hit what you want it to hit. One is to take a cut piece of PVC and spray into the top of it. That way the spray isn't going to blow around and hit other things other than what you want it to hit. Another interesting idea is to put a stake by a vine, such as a bindweed. This is what I immediately think of. Bindweed is often intertwined with plants that you want to keep. So how do you get just that Well, you put a stake there and give it a week or two. Let that bindweed curl up onto the stake and then brush it onto the leaves on the stake. It'll take the herbicide down into the roots. Another idea, again, particularly with vines, is to lay down a piece of newspaper and to put the vine or tall weed down onto the newspaper and then brush the herbicide on with a paintbrush so that any overlap is just getting caught in the newspaper. And the most tricky one, I have a bunch of stars of Bethlehem that are intertwined with good plants, and I want to get rid of the invasive star of Bethlehem. And so I use a latex glove to protect my hand, and then I put an old knit glove on top. And I dip my thumb and forefinger into the herbicide and carefully touch just the targeted weeds. That's a way to make sure that I'm getting only what needs to be gotten. Try the Chelsea chop. And this is a nickname for a technique where you can cut back summer and fall blooming perennials as they're growing in order to encourage them to branch and to be fuller and not quite so high. Some of our wonderful native plants get really tall and flop over, but this is a way of making them a little lower and fuller. It's named that because in Great Britain, the time that they recommend cutting plants back is right at the time of the Chelsea flower show in May. But in truth, here, I don't know about in England, I'm not an English gardener, we can cut our plants back up until the beginning of July. The easy date to remember is July 4. Honestly, it's okay if you do it on July 5, but July 4 is really easy to remember. Each time you cut back, you can cut back up to a half. I like to do a third of the growth each time, and you can do it 2, 3, maybe even 4 times if you're really diligent. This photo here, my friend Elaine Mills cut just the tips many, many times and developed this beautiful, beautiful show of goldenrod. If you have a lot of a particular plant, you may want to cut it diagonally and really cut back lower down and less so high up so that by the time it blooms, you get this beautiful diagonal show of color. Here's a list of plants that can really benefit from this. And in fact, I should have added on, and I recently tried this at someone else's home on one of our native hibiscus, and it really did well. I made a short video of using this technique in my own yard. So if you'd like to watch that for more details, you can. The right clothing can make a big difference. I frankly will not garden unless I'm wearing my pants that have pockets where I slip the kneeling pads. It makes such a big difference to me to be able to, without having to think about what's on the ground, am I going to hurt my knees, to just be able to drop to my knees and reach the plants close up anytime that I need. Lightweight breathable shirts are great to cover your skin and avoid sunburn. I mean, yes, of course, sunscreen is good, but it's even better to have a great lightweight shirt that'll keep not only the sun away, but mosquitoes, etc. And I think that clothes with many, many pockets make a really big difference because you can stash all the things you need without worrying about having something that you need to keep track of. If you want more recommendations on specifics, we did have an article on this that you can read on the Master Gardeners of Northern Virginia website. And here's the link. Water wisely. In our mid-Atlantic area, and for anyone from a different area, you may need to check locally, but in our area, we need on average an inch of water a week. Now, that doesn't mean that we're always going to get an inch every week. That happens to be what we on average get. But here's the deal. When we first plant a plant, it's going to need extra water until its roots are well established and able to reach the water in the soil that it will be able to access long term. Most plants that are perennials need about a year in order to get established. Shrubs need about 2 years, and trees need about 3 years, which means that if they aren't getting that inch of water each week, you should probably give them some extra. Give them about an inch of water so that they're getting that as they're establishing. It is better to water more deeply and less frequently rather than vice versa. Soaker heads are going to be way better than overhead watering. The reason that it's better to water more deeply and less frequently is because that's going to mean that the water sinks down further. It's cooler lower in the soil, less likely to evaporate. And when the water is down there, the plants learn to grow their roots deeply and access the water down there. If we only give a little bit of water at a time and the water never penetrates very deeply, then the plant will have its roots be very shallow. And that's where we know that the water evaporates and burns off much more quickly. So it's better to water more deeply and less frequently. It is better to water in the morning if you can, in order to help avoid any sort of fungus that can be caused when there's water on the leaves overnight. That's not to say that water at night is a horrible thing. Obviously, rain often comes at night. But if you have a choice, it's better in the morning. If you're watering pots, water until the water comes out the hole at the bottom. It's the only way to really know that you've gotten water to the bottom of the pot. And plants in pots are much more vulnerable than plants in the ground. Here is a wonderful tool that I learned about as a gardener at Glen Carlin Library Garden, where our hoses have timers, which means that the water won't come out unless you have the timer turned on. And when the timer expires, the water will stop. They're not expensive. They're easy to find. You can Google them. You can find them in a lot of hardware stores. But it's really great because if you turn on a sprinkler or a soaker hose and you forget to go turn it off, the timer will not have forgotten to turn it off. That can really save a lot of trouble. Here's a really cool tool called an Olla. Sometimes they're spelled differently. This is a tool that was really developed in the American Southwest to stretch the need for irrigation because, of course, their summers are very long and hot and really don't have much in the way of precipitation at all. And so anything that's going to grow that you're trying to cultivate needs watering. Well, an Olla gets buried in the ground and it's unglazed. You fill it with water from the little top part, and the water oozes out through capillary action right at the root zone where the roots really want to access this. And it's really interesting because when I dig them back up, I can see that the roots of my plants have actually grown towards the Olla, which is pretty cool. Here at the bottom, these are my Ollas after I have dug them up for the winter. You can't leave them in if the ground is going to freeze because that unglazed ceramic with water in it. Water, of course, we know expands when it freezes. And when it's in those tiny little capillaries, it will just destroy your Olla. So you do have to pay attention to digging them out at the appropriate time. Now, Colleen, our host today, sent in this wonderful picture of the Ollas that she uses and that she made herself quite affordably. They're pretty easy to make. And if you are interested in doing that, here's a link to show you how you can make them for yourself. Tip, you can be successful. This may sound obvious, but we just want to encourage people. I can't tell you how many people say, oh, I've got a black thumb. I can't grow anything. But the truth is, with the right amount of water and sun and enough mulch to improve the soil, most plants will grow. It really isn't rocket science. They want to grow, they're going to find a way to grow if they can. If a plant is failing or prone to insects, it's probably in the wrong place. Another master gardener gave that very sage bit of wisdom. And I just have to say, try it. Beginner's luck is real and it can get you a long, long way. So don't hesitate to give something a try. What's the worst that can happen? Plant won't live and you replant. Taking care of your tools. And you see here are my hori knives again. You need to sharpen a lot of tools, certainly pruners and shovels and some other tools need to get sharpened, and a diamond blade sharpener can really do well for you. Keeping your tools clean will make them last a lot longer and you'll be happier about using them. You can use a sturdy wire brush to scour them and take off the caked on dirt. You can keep a bin filled with builder sand and you just shove your tools up and down in them to get them clean. And another master gardener said, yeah, and if you've got that, you can add some automotive oil or mineral oil to that sand and you'll oil the tools while you clean them. So here's an important tip. Climate change is here. It's not coming, it's here. Just at the end of last year, the plant hardiness zone map got updated to most parts of the US are now considered a half zone warmer. If you haven't taken a look at that new map, take a look. I've got the link there. Certainly, as we deal with a warming climate, you can try using plants that are labeled for a half to one zone warmer than what you have thought it should be. You need to be prepared for more unexpected weather. It's not just that it's warmer, there's all sorts of wacky weather happening. And this little video here that I'm showing you at the bottom right is 4 Mile Run, which is just downhill from my home. And you see that there are two different fords where you should be able to walk across on top of the stream. And here, after a relatively ordinary storm, both of those fords are overtopped, and our land is really trying to deal with this. So we're getting a lot more flash floods. We can react by planting more trees, thirsty shrubs, and native grasses, which will hold our soil in place better. We're going to have flash droughts. We had one a couple years ago where we had high temperatures one summer and no rain for an unprecedented 7 weeks. I was so frustrated because everywhere I drove, I was seeing these mature woody shrubs and even trees clearly showing that they were wilting. Their leaves looked gray and dull. And I wanted to walk up to everybody's door and knock on it and say, why aren't you watering your plants? Can't you see they're about to die? And indeed, after that drought, even though we got rain eventually, it really wreaked some long-term damage on some of our biggest trees. It had opened them up to more insect predation and just made them more vulnerable. And so even if the drought itself didn't kill them, it made them more likely to be handling problems not very well. Let's put it that way. We're going to get unseasonably cool and warm days in the wrong seasons. For more information, we've got some great info on the Master Gardeners of Northern Virginia website. Elaine Mills has done a wonderful full-length top that you can watch. And Elizabeth Colleton and Thayer Long did some wonderful short videos, 5 different videos, breaking down different aspects of climate consciousness. And they're really great to watch. And there's links here. And we're at a point for more questions. Do we have any more, Colleen?
There was a question about the process of solarization using clear plastic. This was brought up when you were talking about killing lawns, but could you talk about that process in general?
I wish I could. I'm not a big expert on it. I haven't done a lot of that myself. Certainly, the black plastic is going to heat up more than the clear plastic. And so the black plastic is probably going to kill even faster. What I'd like to do is to say that I will look this up, find some references, and put it in an addendum that will go out.
Okay, that would be great. There was a question about Roundup. Someone had heard that the formula was being changed. It would be less effective and wondered if you had any suggestions for alternatives.
Well, that's an interesting thing to have heard. I've not heard exactly that. I know that there are already a number of different formulations of Roundup, or glyphosate is the active ingredient in Roundup. It's available as other product names. I'm not an herbicide expert. I really want to stand by what I said. I would not just depend on Roundup or glyphosate as the first herbicide to try on just any plant. There are plenty of plants that it will not work on, that it's not even really supposed to work on very well. It's really more for herbaceous plants than for woody plants. Woody plants are more susceptible to different herbicides. So I really am not going to be recommending a generic sort of herbicide for just any plant, start here. No, you really need to research each plant, find out what's supposed to be effective on it, and use that. And if you have trouble doing that, although I do recommend, I mean, you could say, I'm just going to pick a plant here, I've got a herbicide for bindweed. And I would Google that and I'd put in site:/edu and find out what the universities are recommending as a good thing to use on that. And I've done it many times. I mentioned the Star of Bethlehem problem that I have. It's in a place where digging out doesn't really work, and it's so entrenched that it's really too deep. It's on a hill, and I'd be creating way too much erosion if I tried to dig them all out. And I had to really dig a little, but the information is out there, and it's not that hard to go for if you use that site:/edu ending term.
There was a question about hori knives and how do you store it between uses to protect yourself against getting cut?
Good question. I have to say they're not that sharp. They're far more meant for digging than for cutting. The tooth part can cut, but the other side, you can run your hand along it quite hard and it's not going to cut you. I have a holster that I keep my hori in while I'm gardening. In between, I actually used a big garden trug that just holds all my tools. And frankly, I just toss it in there and it's fine.
Another participant wanted to know if you would share where you get your pants with big pockets and where you get your pads.
Sure, I can do that again. I have to say this as a master gardener, I'm not recommending any particular companies or products, but I can tell you that I have many pants from Duluth Trading Company. They've got a whole line of pants that they call heirloom gardening clothing. And there's both pants and overalls that have a great big pocket, and they sell a pad that slides right in there. Now, there are other companies that do that, and I'm not saying that they're not good. You should definitely Google pants to accommodate kneeling pads. I happen to have used the Duluth Trading Company ones because the first ones that I got worked so well for me, and I know they fit me, and I'm used to them. Let's go on to the last third of our presentation. This one is going to sound like a no-brainer, but gardens grow. They are really supposed to change. It's not just that plants grow, but with time, the gardens themselves will change in nature. The plants will be bigger, they will do different things. New plants will have started, that your plants will reproduce, and things will just be different. An area that used to be sunny will be shady, or vice versa, depending if you lost something. And this is normal. This is the way that it should be. I love this quote from Joanne Hutton, who has been something of a mentor to me. And she says, remove the term garden maintenance from your vocabulary since a garden is dynamic and meant to change. Go along for the ride and enjoy it. Let the plants speak to you as they grow where they want to grow. Less need for absolute control equals greater pleasure. And it's really true. If you can enjoy what the plants want to do and kind of treat them as their own little characters and learn from them as they do their thing, you're going to have so much more fun in your garden. This is my garden my backyard. When we first bought our home, it was completely covered in ivy and it was growing up the trees. It took me a year and a half to pull that ivy out. And I was desperately planting in a hurry because it's all sloping. I was afraid it was going to erode. But over time, as it has filled in, I have become so very happy with it. And the plants have done their thing. And I have quite a different garden than I thought I would, but I love it. Garden design. And here, Beverly Johnson gave me some wonderful tips. She has some really great quotes here. Think about how you will access the garden and who else will use it. It's not just about being in the garden, but how you're going to get into it. And think about what other people and also what other animals are going to be using your garden. And this is just such a great quote. Not every shrub should be sheared to a square or a green meatball. We want groups of plant friends, not lines of soldiers. And I am really with her. I really enjoy plants that take the shape that nature gives them instead of the shape that we want to impose on them. Certainly, I can enjoy a topiary garden as much as anybody else, but it's not a relaxed and happy look. I think that in our personal gardens, I love it when I see a plant looking like it is a happy plant all by itself. Bring shrubs away from the foundation, have a bed at least the depth of the height of your first floor. And it's so true. If you drive around in suburbia, you'll find just these little tiny foundation plants pushed up against the house. And the truth is, for looks, it should be deeper. And her advice about having the bed be as deep as the height of the first floor is a really great way to go. Your garden is a great way to add some curves. Put your beds in curves if everything else is straight. You'll add a lot of graciousness to your garden. And this is a great question. Are there places to sit? And it's really interesting because I very rarely deliberately simply go into my garden and sit. When I am in my garden, I really want to be working in my garden. But the seats and benches add a rest for the eye, and it just feels so much more welcoming when there is a place to sit. We really advise that you plant in odd number groups unless you're trying to create a really formal look. That's when even numbers are used more. But for something that's relaxed, odd just feels better. It's the same way as in flower bouquets. Odd is better than even numbers. To attract pollinators, you need to put in pretty big groups of plants that will make an impact when blooming. A lot of our pollinators don't have great eyesight, and they need a mass of color to say, here we are, come over here, get the nectar, get the pollen. So that's a good bit of advice. And if you need some help with design, you can you can find a list of local native specialist professionals at the Plant Nova Natives website, which has all sorts of information. This is a kind of interesting tip, and it tends to be more about houseplants, but sometimes not. And that is that there is a difference between roots grown in water and roots grown in soil. When roots grow, they grow roots that are based on the medium that they're growing in. And the characteristics that develop aren't always really good at translating from water to something else or from soil to water. And so, if you want to, particularly with a house plant, if you want to make babies and have a plant grow eventually in soil, you should probably just start it there. I used to start a lot of my house plants in water and they'd grow great big roots, and then I'd plant them in the soil and I'd wonder why nothing changed for a really long time. I thought I'd given them a really big head start by growing those roots out. And it turns out, well, those roots were water roots. They were used to getting all that they needed from water, and they had to grow some new roots when they got into the soil. So start it where you want it to continue growing. Certainly, if you need to hold a cutting for a couple days, I'm not saying you shouldn't put it in water for a day or two, but plant it up just as soon as you can. So, this is an interesting tip that I sometimes need to internalize. Seeds are not scary. Most seeds must touch the ground to germinate. So, if you have some of those plants, pull the mulch away from the soil so that when the seeds drop, they can contact soil. Over at the Glen Carlin Library Garden, we grow Melonpodium, which is listed here with other plants that benefit from this technique. It's a sweet little yellow flower that readily self seeds, but we typically have a lot of mulch on our beds. And so the Melonpodium drops its seeds, and the ones that it drops into the beds hit the mulch and they don't take, but the ones that drop into the lawn do grow because they nestle down and hit the soil there. So we're forever digging baby Melonpodium out of the lawn and moving it into the beds. You can deal with this by just late in the season making sure that your beds aren't covered with mulch quite as heavily. But try starting more plants from seeds. Seeds are very affordable. You can get a really great variety of plants from seed more than from started plants. And you can often save seeds from your favorite plants. And I just want to alert you that over at the Glen Carlin Library demonstration garden, we have just started a new seed library, and we've been saving seeds from the garden and we're making them available for free to anybody who wants to take some. We're hoping that people who take some will also share some seeds with the seed library and other people. We're hoping that this will be kind of self-generating without us having to put a bunch of money into it to keep it going. But if you want to try some seeds, stop by the Glen Carlin Library Garden and take a look at the seed library. Tools. Pickaxe. Our host Colleen has found great success with her pickaxe, as has Elaine Mills. Pickaxes are really great when you've got a plant that is really difficult to dig out, or you need to really divide the plant. Some plants grow multiple parts, but they're so tight that it's all but impossible to pull them apart. And a pickaxe can certainly help with that. Elaine was saying that this interesting pickaxe here on the right that has the three tongs is actually the one that she's found most successful for removing liriope from her garden. We've got two slides about containers. The first is from Anne Reed, and this photo is not Anne Reed. This is Judy Funderburk, who's another one of the coordinators over at Glen Carlin with our container cart here. It's a library cart. But Anne has given a number of wonderful container presentations. So I'm so grateful she sent out some really good pieces of advice. She says, clean out your old pots before spring. Wretched relics from last year may have overwintered there. Don't just try to plant straight into them again. Match the pot to the plant roots. Some plants have really long roots and they need a deep pot. Others have short. So if you can match those up, that's a great idea. Watch out for overwatering. Use a moisture meter or at least your finger to check. You can pretty easily overwater container pots, and you need to make sure that you're both watering them enough, but also not watering them too much. If you've got a small space, you can consider a caddy to move your plant to sun or shade. It actually works. And this is kind of the corollary of the sun shade thing. If you don't have a lot of room and you've only got a fairly small spot of sun that moves during the day and you're desperate to grow a tomato, you can put it on a little caddy and move that pot during the day so that it gets the sun that it actually needs. You should know the pros and cons of container types and how it may impact a plant's health. In particular, for instance, unglazed ceramic is great for pots that need some dryness because the clay itself sucks up a lot of water and maybe for drier settings, whereas a glazed pot or a plastic pot doesn't absorb any of that water and tends to hold it a little bit more. Beware of self-watering containers that can collect salt residue. So that's a little caveat on self-watering. If you want to reuse last year's soil, just be aware that nutrients have washed away. So after you've looked for critters and, large pieces of root and so forth, you can add compost and refresh with a third new potting mix, blend it well, and just replant in it. So here's the second part about containers, and this is my big one. Never plant in a pot with no hole. I think it is a recipe for disaster. You cannot know if you've gotten water to the bottom of the pot without having a hole and seeing the water come out. But on the other hand, if it has no hole, you don't know if you're giving it too much water and creating a situation in which the roots will just rot. Don't try to get fancy at the bottom of the pot. I cannot tell you. On Pinterest, it seems like everybody is so concerned that the soil is going to slip out of the bottom of the pot. And I've never found that to be an issue. You don't need to put anything down there to keep the soil in. Another thing, and I have recommended this in the past and am changing my tune, watch out for moisture grabbing polymers. They're these little crystals that soak up water and hold it. And it's great to stretch out for a while the amount of moisture in your pot. But once it dries out, those polymers may grab moisture from the plant, take it away from the fine roots of the plant. So it can actually be a problem. So a great rule of thumb is the thriller filler spiller rule to create a nicely balanced mixture. It's not something that you must do, but it does create a nice balance. And this pot over here has the thriller, this ornamental corn growing really high. It's got the spiller coming over the edge, adding a kind of lusciousness. And then in the center, I think that looks like anise hyssop filling out the middle and filling it all in. And most of the time, if you've got those three elements, it'll be a nice mixed pot. If you don't want to do mixed pots, that's just fine. But sometimes if you group them together, they'll have more impact. They look really nice and play off of each other and play those roles for each other. It is okay to use a pot in a bed where you sink the part partially or even entirely into the bed. I have done that in my own front yard. I like to grow Jerusalem artichoke, which is an edible, a semi-native edible, not from right here where I am, but nearby. But they're incredibly aggressive spreaders, and I don't want them getting throughout my garden. And so I bought a couple of very large pots. I sunk them halfway into the ground, and that keeps the Jerusalem artichokes from spreading everywhere. Here's a great trick. A lot of people hear about black walnut trees, which have jugalone, an organic compound and a allelopathic compound that stunts the growth of many types of plants. And they think, oh, black walnut is a bad plant. And if I have one, I should cut it down. But in truth, you may have some more options than cutting the tree down. I'm here to speak up on behalf of the black walnuts. Jugalone is in the leaves and nuts in addition to the roots. So if you keep the bed on top clean, pick up those nuts and leaves, you're going to be reducing the jugalone greatly. If it really is a problem and you're worried about those roots, you can create a raised bed on top so that your bed is actually above those black walnut roots. And you can improve the soil drainage with organic matter so that the juglone is washing away periodically. There are a lot of plants that are very tolerant of the juglone, and I've got the list here. I'm not going to try to read it out, but you can take a screenshot if you like, and it should be in the handout. How to keep track of your tools, paint tool handles for visibility. And here's a picture of doing that. And I have to say, I notoriously one time was working with a fellow master gardener, and my hori knife at the time had a wooden handle. And I ended up somehow mysteriously burying it with the plant, and I had to dig the plant back up because I couldn't see that brown wooden handle in the soil. But if you paint the handle, it's going to be much more likely that you'll be able to see it. You can also wear a holster to keep track of your tools while you're working. And I have one here that I searched for quite some time to find 3 pockets so that I could have my 3 most commonly used tools: my pruner, my hori knife, and my pruning saw. A great tool that I didn't learn about until I put this presentation together is a Cobra head weeder. It has some good torque and gets into tight places and is pretty affordable. So if you have a lot of weeding that you need some help with, this is a tool to consider. Plan for proper support of your plants. Some plants, especially those with big flowers or big clusters of flowers, need some support so that the plant does not flop over. And a grow through support is a really great one. And I hope you can see this here. This is a grow through support. You put the support up before the plant comes, and it just finds its way through there. You don't want to do it after the plant is already grown. You'll end up breaking too many of the stems. But if you put it there first and the plant grows through it, the support virtually vanishes. You can imagine peonies, dahlias, these great big heads, they flop over so easily. Any bit of moisture in it, the flower just gets so heavy it flops over. So it needs some staking. This Baptisia here on the bottom left has a grow through support underneath it, and you would never know it. That's over at our Glen Carlin Library Garden. We've got a master gardener who explains small tomato cages work great for dwarf tomatoes and peppers and eggplants, but really they're too small for regular tomato plants. But she advises, and I have done this, you can take 2 of them and put them top to top, as you see over here on the right, wire them together in a few spots, and they become big enough for a regular tomato. Another use for the tomato cages is kind of as a grow through support. And Nancy Brooks points out that if you leave them in the ground, they'll rust and just blend in really well. Shovels. So we had a number of people recommend some specific shovels. This one is a root slayer shovel, and you can see it's short and pointed, and it has toothed sides. The spearhead spade was recommended by a number of people also, and it is also short and narrow and pointy at the end. Both rounded and straight shovels have great uses. The straight ones are great for edging or digging a really precision hole. And I had to add that a long handle really improves the torque. And here's my compatriot Paul Noon digging out liriope that we dug out several years ago from the Glen Carlin Library Garden, since it's an invasive. And it had been there a long time, and those roots really wanted to stay there. But with a good shovel with a long handle, you get the blade in and pull back on the handle. You've got some good torque there. You can do a lot. trick. You can bring color into your garden even without flowers. And this video on the right that I'm going to start here was when I was at Master Gardener College and went on a tour of some local gardens. And I thought this was so impressive how these people had worked this beautiful blue into their garden in a number of ways. That's one of my favorite colors, and I wanted that color in my garden. And so I imitated them, and this is my little takeoff on what they did. I have a probiotic that I get a new bottle every month, and it comes in this beautiful blue bottle, but what to do with that beautiful bottle? And so I now have a bottle bush in my front yard, and I took that photo just last week. Other ideas on that same tour down at Master Gardener College was a garden that had this really fascinating display. These people had collected used colorful bowling balls and mounted them on stakes and created this fascinating art in place decoration. And then I've been really pleased just in the past, I think, half year on Columbia Pike here in Arlington, this newly redone portion of the pike that has native plants planted. I'm really thrilled about that. It's a bunch of switchgrass and Grollo sumac that are planted here. But they painted this concrete wall this beautiful teal color. And every time I drive by, it just lifts my eyes. It feels so refreshing to see that gorgeous color. Now, when I was traveling in Spain, we were in Cordoba, and they have a wonderful patio tradition where these interior patios are available for a lot of people to see. And we did a little patio tour, and they use pots mounted on their walls, which I'm not saying that we should start doing that much, but their color cues were really terrific. You can see this garden had all light blue pots, and they echoed it with a light blue door and a different sized pot. And this garden used red pots, and they have the red chair. And I'm not trying to tell you you must put pots on your walls, but there are a lot of ways that we can bring color into our gardens other than the flowers. And this kind of color will be there all year round. And that is the end of my tips, tricks, and tools. And I just have to say thank you to all the wonderful master gardeners who provided some of these tips and photos for me. And I am open for any more questions, Colleen.
Oh, thank you so much, Alyssa. We have not got more questions, but lots of comments in the chat about how grateful everyone is for this talk. I think you've helped us all in a really big way to improve our gardening endeavors, and we all thank you.
Well, thank you. I do find
Right.
gardening to be one of the happiest things that I do. And if any of these tips, tricks, or tools help make it happier for other people, I will have done my job today.
Thank you so much. This was really great. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.